The 1770s. James Cook's third expedition. His goal was to discover new lands in the far south. But instead, he encountered an impenetrable barrier of ice. Giant walls of frozen water became an insurmountable obstacle, making further exploration practically impossible. Some of Cook's contemporaries came to a very different conclusion. They believed that Captain Cook had discovered nothing less than a giant wall at the very edge of a flat Earth, a wall supposedly protecting the oceans from falling into space. And even 300 years later, there are still people who believe this idea. But Antarctica is such a strange continent that, compared with everything that has actually been discovered there, even theories about the edge of the world don't seem like the craziest thing. What kind of monster did researchers supposedly encounter in a deep Antarctic lake? Is it true that real blood flows beneath the Antarctic ice? Where does a hole in a glacier the size of Iceland lead? And, most importantly, why is Antarctica actually much stranger than you think? Even the discovery of this continent was incredibly unusual. Personally, I've always wondered, why did humanity discover Antarctica so late? The idea of a mysterious Terra Australis, the unknown southern land, appeared as far back as antiquity. Ancient Greeks and Romans believed that there had to be something enormous in the southern hemisphere, something that would balance the known lands of the north. That's why medieval maps often depicted Terra Australis as a gigantic continent. It was believed to be inhabited by exotic peoples and strange animals, even though nobody had ever actually seen them. Ironically, this colorful myth about Terra Australis encouraged explorers to sail into the region. In the 17th century, the Dutch sailed in search of the legendary continent, and they found it. Well, more precisely, they became the first Europeans to encounter Australia, which was then known as New Holland. Some cartographers mistakenly decided that this must be the same Terra Australis everyone had been talking about. And so they began using the name Australia for the continent. It wasn't until January 1820 that an expedition commanded by Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen and Mikhail Lazarev became the first to actually see the shores of the southern continent. I know what you're thinking. Didn't James Cook reach the region about 50 years earlier? Yes. But because he saw only ice and not the actual landmass of Antarctica, his discovery is generally not considered the discovery of the continent itself. When the British finally renamed New Holland Australia in 1824, the southern icy continent was still left without a proper name. Several names were proposed. Ultima, meaning the last land, and Antipodia, meaning the opposite land. Eventually, the name Antarctica emerged from the idea of placing the southern continent in opposition to the Arctic and the North Pole. And here's the funny part. If the Dutch had discovered Antarctica first, it might have been called Australia, and Australia itself could have remained New Holland. But for most people today, Antarctica is almost as mysterious and unknown as it was 200 years ago. There are no permanent residents there. However, around 4,500 people work at various research stations during the summer, and a little more than 1,000 remain through the winter. Most of them are scientists. And all of this is happening across a continent covering roughly 14 million square kilometers. That's almost the combined area of the United States and Canada. But even if a country wanted to build a city in Antarctica, it wouldn't be allowed. According to the Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959, the frozen continent is reserved for peaceful scientific research. Permanent colonization is not permitted. And ironically, this very isolation is one reason why conspiracy theories about an enormous ice wall at the edge of the world continue to survive. You can't simply sail there yourself and check everything whenever you want. So, let's imagine for a moment that the flat Earth theory is actually true. The Earth is flat, and an enormous ice wall really does exist at its edge. But then we immediately run into a massive problem: cosmic radiation. Its effects would be so powerful that the surface of such a wall would be constantly bombarded by radiation. Over enormous periods of time, the ice would be destroyed and gradually lost. Our imaginary flat Earth would be moving through space like a giant comet, leaving a trail behind it. We simply couldn't fail to notice such a process somewhere on the horizon. But there's an even bigger problem. Over millions of years, our oceans would eventually disappear. The ice wall could only be replenished by water from those oceans, and eventually, enormous amounts of that water would be lost into space. So the next time you meet a committed flat Earth believer, try telling them about this thought experiment and see how they react. But jokes aside, Antarctica is already so extreme without any fantasy involved that even highly trained people can struggle to survive there. The nearest major city to Antarctica is Puerto Williams, on Navarino Island in Chile. It is roughly 1,000 kilometers away from the Antarctic Peninsula. And between them lies not simply an ocean, but one of the most turbulent stretches of water on the planet, the Drake Passage. Located between Cape Horn and the Antarctic Peninsula, it is a genuine nightmare for sailors and explorers. This is where waters from the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans meet. Their interaction helps create one of the most powerful ocean currents on Earth. Around 135 million cubic meters of water pass through the Drake Passage every second. That's almost 600 times more water than flows through the Amazon River. And then, add the storms. The weather here can change almost instantly. One moment, everything is calm. And the next, enormous waves can rise as high as 15 meters. If even the captains of modern ships aren't always certain that they can cross the passage without problems, imagine the sailors who attempted it centuries ago, in wooden sailing ships. And when you finally reach the shores of Antarctica, the real challenge begins. Winds can reach around 150 kilometers per hour, and temperatures can fall to around -70 degrees Celsius. But there's more. Because of the enormous thickness of the Antarctic ice sheet, which averages more than 3 kilometers in many places, the air at high elevations is extremely thin. Breathing becomes difficult. Conditions can be comparable to those near the summit of Mount Everest. And Antarctica has claimed many lives. In 1910, British explorer Robert Falcon Scott began his second attempt to become the first person to reach the South Pole. His main goal was to plant the British flag there, while also conducting scientific research across Antarctica. In January 1912, a team of 5 men finally reached their destination. But unfortunately, they were met with devastating disappointment. Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen and his team had beaten them by 34 days. Scott and his companions had arrived second, but that was not their greatest defeat. On the journey back, the men were already exhausted from hunger and cold. Blistering Antarctic winds accelerated frostbite on their hands, feet, and faces. They never made it back to their coastal base. Robert Scott and the other members of his team were eventually found by a rescue party from the expedition. But alongside the bodies of the dead explorers, the rescuers discovered something remarkable: fossilized plants. Scott and his companions had carried these fossils with them almost to the very end. Despite their exhaustion, the rocks contained fossilized remains of Glossopteris, a plant that lived around 250 million years ago. This discovery became important evidence that Antarctica had once been part of Pangaea, the enormous supercontinent that existed hundreds of millions of years ago. But Glossopteris grew in warm, humid environments, which means that the frozen continent we see today once had a dramatically warmer climate. And so, driven by the desire for discovery and fame, scientists continued traveling to Antarctica with enormous enthusiasm, even after Scott's tragic death. In 1914, explorer Ernest Shackleton launched the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition. He had an incredibly ambitious goal: to become the first person to cross Antarctica from coast to coast. A team of 28 men set out aboard the ship Endurance. But in January 1915, the vessel became trapped in pack ice. After 10 months of being imprisoned by the ice, the ship was destroyed. Shackleton's team survived on the frozen landscape, eating seal and penguin meat. Then, in April 1916, after building a small lifeboat, Shackleton and 5 other men decided to make an extremely dangerous journey to South Georgia Island. They crossed approximately 1,300 kilometers of open ocean. After reaching the island, Shackleton managed to organize the rescue of the entire remaining crew, and that can truly be considered a miracle. Every member of the expedition had spent months, literally in the middle of a frozen wilderness, and somehow survived the cold and hunger. To survive in Antarctica, you need more than physical strength. The psychological stress caused by isolation, confined spaces, and weak sunlight, especially during the Antarctic winter, can lead to depression and severe anxiety. The numerous graves of explorers and abandoned frozen remains are a reminder of just how difficult it is to tame this frozen wilderness. But they haven't stopped scientists from studying it, because over the past 200 years, Antarctica has become surrounded by myths and conspiracy theories, the kind that can intrigue even the greatest skeptics. Have you ever heard of Operation Highjump? Its story goes like this. In 1946, immediately after the end of the Second World War, the United States sent an expedition to the frozen continent under the command of Admiral Richard Byrd. Officially, the mission involved studying the Antarctic ice sheet, testing equipment, and training personnel under extreme conditions. Sounds normal, right? But almost 5,000 military personnel were involved. There were 13 ships, a submarine, and 33 aircraft. Who sends such an enormous armada to Antarctica? Just for scientific research? Admiral Byrd himself added fuel to the fire when he returned. In an interview with Chilean journalists, he reportedly warned that the United States needed to be prepared for a war against an enemy that could potentially attack from the polar regions at extraordinary speed. I checked. He really did make statements along those lines. And this is where one of the most famous Antarctic conspiracy theories was born. According to the theory, Operation Highjump wasn't really a scientific expedition at all. It was supposedly an attempt to locate and destroy secret Nazi bases hidden in Antarctica. The story claims that after losing the Second World War, the Nazis escaped to the South Pole, built underground cities, and were simply waiting for the right moment to return and attack again. Sounds completely insane. But there is one historical fact worth mentioning. In 1938, Nazi Germany really did organize an expedition to Antarctica. Its territory of interest became known as New Swabia. The purpose of the expedition was to investigate the possibility of establishing a whaling base. At the time, Germany desperately needed whale oil. It was used to produce butter substitutes, fuel, lubricants, and even soap, for a Nazi regime preparing for a major war. This was an extremely valuable resource. The German expedition therefore investigated the potential for whaling and mapped parts of the region. But what did they actually leave behind? A few German flags, dropped from aircraft to mark territory. There is no reliable evidence that the Nazis constructed some massive underground city or secret Antarctic fortress. However, the story of the New Swabia expedition became mixed with another mystery: the disappearance of several high-ranking Nazi officials after Germany's defeat. It was later established that many of them escaped to Argentina and Brazil. But in the late 1940s, when German scientific achievements were surrounded by an aura of secrecy, the idea that the Nazis had escaped to Antarctica didn't seem quite as impossible as it does today. And perhaps that's why some people continue to take the theory seriously. But let's assume for a moment that there really were no Nazi bases in Antarctica. What about the ruins of ancient civilizations? One popular theory claims that Antarctica may have been the location of the legendary Atlantis. You've probably seen those famous 16th century maps that supposedly show Antarctica without ice, as if it were an ordinary green continent. But historians have demonstrated that these maps actually represent distorted interpretations of other coastlines, particularly South America. And there is another problem. The Antarctic ice sheet isn't merely old. It is one of the oldest large ice masses on Earth. We know that parts of the Antarctic ice sheet have existed for roughly 34 million years. Modern satellite observations and radar surveys allow scientists to see deep beneath the ice. And they have not discovered convincing evidence of structures that could be connected to an ancient human civilization. Yes, I'd love for giant pyramids hidden beneath Antarctic ice to be real too. But the supposed Antarctic pyramids are almost certainly just mountain peaks, shaped by erosion and surrounded by ice. The best conditions for life in Antarctica existed around 90 million years ago, during the age of dinosaurs. That was long before humans appeared on Earth, let alone before the emergence of advanced human civilizations. So the reality is simple. You shouldn't expect to find Atlantis beneath the Antarctic ice. But then, where does this enormous hole lead? And where did it come from? In the 1970s, scientists discovered a gigantic ice-free area in the Weddell Sea, right in the middle of the Antarctic ice, a polynya. And in 2017, scientists detected another enormous polynya, one so large that its surface area was comparable to the size of Iceland, more than 80,000 square kilometers. A gigantic hole in the ice, right next to the most mysterious continent on Earth. Surely this must be an entrance to the hollow Earth. According to supporters of the theory, there is another world inside our planet, a world filled with strange creatures, or even advanced civilizations possessing unknown technologies. Basically, something straight out of the latest Godzilla or King Kong movies. I love science fiction too, but in reality, a polynya is created by natural ocean processes. Deep ocean currents transport warmer water toward the surface. That warmer water prevents the ice from freezing, and that's what creates the opening. There is still ocean water underneath it, not an underground kingdom. And as for the hollow Earth theory, detailed models of our planet's interior, based on seismic research, have ruled it out. The inside of Earth is not hollow. It is filled with extremely hot rock and a molten metallic outer core surrounding a solid inner core. Honestly, I don't even know why we need to invent all these mysteries, because the real discoveries beneath Antarctica are far more fascinating than the conspiracy theories. Imagine this. You're standing in the middle of a snow-white Antarctic glacier. Everything around you is frozen. And then, suddenly, you see a waterfall, and it looks like blood is pouring from the ice. This bizarre phenomenon was first observed in 1911, during research on Taylor Glacier in the McMurdo Dry Valleys. At the time, the blood falls looked so unnatural and terrifying that some people seriously considered them a mystical phenomenon. But eventually, scientists discovered the truth. The red water isn't blood at all. Its source is a subglacial lake, hidden beneath thick layers of ice. The lake has been isolated from the outside world for more than 2 million years. It contains almost no oxygen, but it has an extremely high concentration of iron. When water from the lake slowly emerges and comes into contact with oxygen in the atmosphere, the iron oxidizes. In other words, it rusts, and the result is a stream of bright red water, water that looks remarkably similar to blood. In fact, what's really surprising is that Antarctica isn't covered in rusty springs, because beneath its ice sheet there are more than 400 known subglacial lakes. Many of them remain liquid, even though they are buried several kilometers beneath the ice. One of the most famous is Lake Vostok. It lies roughly 4 kilometers beneath the surface. It is a unique reservoir of water, isolated from the surface environment for millions of years. There is complete darkness, extremely high pressure, and very little oxygen. But in 2016, a sensational story appeared, claiming that scientists had discovered a gigantic octopus-like creature in Lake Vostok, with tentacles stretching dozens of meters. Russian scientists supposedly named the creature Organism 46b. But, as often happens with sensational stories, there were no photographs or video recordings proving that such a creature existed. Rumors claimed that Organism 46b had been taken to a secret laboratory and that nobody had heard anything about it since. It sounds like another classic Antarctic myth, and for good reason. The entire story was actually fabricated by journalist Viktor Nikolaev of the Russian tabloid newspaper Komsomolskaya Pravda. No giant octopus and no other gigantic monster has ever been found in Lake Vostok, but there is definitely life there, at least microbial life, and this part of the story isn't fiction. Microorganisms exist beneath the Antarctic ice, and according to genetic analyses, some of them appear to have surprisingly little in common with modern surface life. Studying the organisms of Lake Vostok is extremely difficult. Scientists cannot simply drill into the lake and explore it directly. Doing so could introduce surface microorganisms into an untouched ecosystem and potentially destroy it forever. So researchers have to rely largely on samples taken from the ice directly above the lake. There could even be fish down there. We simply don't know for certain yet. But recent satellite studies have revealed something else. Beneath Antarctica lies an interconnected network of subglacial lakes, with water circulating between them. So perhaps, eventually, scientists will be able to obtain samples from shallower locations, with a much lower risk of contamination. But these same studies revealed another mystery: a gravitational anomaly. It is located in the Wilkes Land region of Antarctica. The gravitational field there is slightly stronger than the surrounding background levels, which means that something unusually massive may be hidden beneath the ice. But what? Some scientists have suggested that it could be connected to an ancient asteroid impact. Not necessarily the asteroid itself, but the enormous geological changes caused by such an impact. Further geophysical studies have revealed evidence of an ancient impact structure with a diameter of roughly 500 kilometers. If this interpretation is correct, it could be one of the largest impact structures on Earth. Its estimated age is around 250 million years, but there is an alternative, and currently more plausible explanation. The gravitational anomaly may have been caused by unusually dense volcanic rock left behind by ancient volcanic activity deep beneath Antarctica. One thing is certain: studying this continent can tell us an enormous amount about the history of our planet, because that history is literally preserved beneath the ice. The Antarctic ice also contains enormous reserves of natural resources that could potentially become important to humanity in the distant future. And then there is something even more valuable: huge reserves of fresh water stored inside the Antarctic ice sheet, water that could become increasingly important as the world faces growing water shortages. But perhaps the most surprising thing about Antarctica is that it is helping bring us closer to space exploration. NASA has been using the frozen continent for years as a testing ground for spacecraft technologies and equipment. The reason is simple: Antarctic conditions are remarkably similar to some environments we may encounter elsewhere in the solar system, especially on the icy moons of the giant planets. The European Space Agency has also established the Concordia Research Station in Antarctica. It is sometimes called Earth's Mars. Here, researchers conduct experiments in physiology and psychology, trying to understand how future crews traveling to Mars might cope with isolation, extreme environmental conditions, and limited resources. And finally, the enormous Antarctic ice sheet can act as a natural detector for some of the most elusive particles in the universe: neutrinos. These mysterious particles are produced inside stars, and during some of the most energetic events in the cosmos, including supernova explosions. Special experiments such as ANITA are designed to detect unusual electromagnetic signals associated with high-energy particles passing through hundreds of meters of Antarctic ice. Detecting these particles by other methods can be extremely difficult. And here's where things get really interesting. Several experiments have already detected results that appear to differ significantly from theoretical predictions. Perhaps I'll make a separate, much more detailed video about this. Because if these observations are eventually confirmed, Antarctica could literally help us discover new physics. Not bad, for a continent we've known for barely 200 years.